is Jeffrey Babin. I'm an associate professor in engineering entrepreneurship. So my home school is in engineering, and we have a whole entrepreneurship program. My secondary appointment is in the marketing department at Wharton. And really, everything that I do at Penn is about experiential learning. So classroom is about entrepreneurship. If you've heard of the Wharton Venture Initiation Program, and anybody apply to VIP? Okay, so I'm either going to see you tomorrow or Friday, so you'll get me again. Different context. So I'm the business advisor, one of the business advisors for Wharton VIP. And then also we have what's called the Global Consulting Practicum, which is sorry to terrorize the dog here, I just realized I've got props in my bag, which is an embedded consulting practice in the Wharton MBA program. So I'm also a country or regional manager for that and work on all sorts of stuff. But the bottom line is it's all about experiential learning, which is pretty cool. And pull these out. Okay, now I've got props. This dog. And if I step on your dog, it's hate me for life. Okay, so really today, and I'll put contact information up again. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. We'll make the slides available, but the slides are irrelevant. What you guys do is much more important. There are 4 things that I want to cover. And as I said, about an hour and 10 minutes. And it really depends on how you guys work in the teams. We can spend a little bit more time or a little bit less time to kind of give you a general idea of what's going on. But the 4 things that I want you guys to take away is a little bit of work about team formation. How many of you think you might apply to Penvention? Okay, or enter that competition? How many of you are going to be working with a team at some point in your Penn career? Every hand should go up. So I want to give you some food for thought about how to work with teams. And then we'll also talk about ideas. The basic topic of what we're focused on here is ideas. And we're going to talk a little bit about what makes good ideas. I'll share with you, that's why I have some of the props here. And then we'll actually do some exercises on ideation and idea generation. And that's where it's going to bring us to the point where you actually create an idea with a group, or at least get started on the process. Depends on how we do it and how much time we go through. So let's start with the first one. Who do you want on your team? Who do you guys want on your team? What do you look for if you're forming a team? What do you look for?
Passion.
Passion. Passion towards what?
Whatever you're somewhat interested in, but maybe complementary.
Okay. So it becomes really important that you guys actually have some commonality in terms of what you're trying to see and that you guys are passionately engaged with it. What else?
Diversity.
Diversity in what areas?
Say you have a technical aspect and a civil aspect.
Okay, good. So diversity maybe in skills or backgrounds?
Compatibility.
In what way?
Skills and qualities.
Okay, so compatibility in skills and qualities. What else do you want to be compatible with?
Personality.
Yeah, and that could be part of diversity, right? So sometimes you're more compatible in terms of a diverse collection. Sometimes it's, I really want people that share common values, which becomes an important part. So one thing that didn't come up, maybe it would have if I gave you a little bit more time, is it's really important to have a level of trust. Trust that you'll do what you say you'll do, they'll do what they say they do, and that ultimately you just believe in one another's ability to contribute towards whatever this common goal is. We need to make sure that there's some commonality, so the point about having a shared goal or objective is important. The other aspect is shared values. So suddenly we start touching on cultural issues with team, but it is really important. And then you hit the big ones. And what's kind of interesting is how important diversity is. Who do you think you're most likely to start a company with? Your first company, who do you think you're going to start it with? Who would be the likely candidates?
Your best friend.
Best friends. Who else? What's the other logical one?
Family.
Family. Okay? Those are going to be the 2 most common ones. And maybe it's not your best friend, maybe it's somebody you've developed a close relationship here, in school or something, but you will most likely gravitate towards people with whom you've already built a trusted relationship, and that's going to be your friends and family. And in fact, a lot of businesses are started with friends and family. Here's the dirty little secret, which should make sense to you. When it comes to actually growing large, successful companies, in the long term. So short term, you're probably going to do really well with friends and family. Long term, you're going to be able to build larger, more adaptable, more creative organizations if you have greater diversity. One of the big reasons for that is you'll have to find your way towards the trusted relationship, but you're going to start with a basis of diversity in skills and experience. Like we heard, who gave me my skills and experience? You gave me some, somebody up here, and you gave me some, right? So that diversity is really important. And as you begin to actually build businesses or work on things that are more complex, having people that have access to different networks is really important. So diversity becomes much more critical when you look in a longer term view. Short term, if you're dealing with class projects or short term things, stick with friends and family. It's much easier, and figure everybody at this place is going to be capable. Okay, so let's talk about what makes an idea good, which is kind of an interesting concept. So now it's sort of crop time. Anybody heard of nanotech? I'm a huge Kickstarter fan. Anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge Kickstarter fan. So anybody heard of nanotech? Nobody's heard of nanotech? No. Okay. So how many people use smartphones? How many people have had the opportunity to use a smartphone in the winter when you're wearing gloves? Okay. So who's got tips on their gloves? Who has capacitive built into their gloves? Who has gloves that do not have that built in? This basically turns this one for leather, this one for fabrics. It's basically like nail polish. It's a nanomaterial you put on your fingertips, and now any glove can work a smartphone. Okay? Now, kind of interesting, and certainly something that resonated with me, so I bought that. But what's interesting, you guys, everybody know Kickstarter, crowdfunding in general? So for those that might not be familiar, Kickstarter is what we call a crowdfunding opportunity. So it basically provides ideas, projects, artistic things, anything that people want to work on. And it allows you to sponsor it. There's no equity here. This is not about financing. Well, it is about financing, but it's about financing projects for spiffs, some things that you might get. So if you were a sponsor of Kickstarter, and they had, in this particular case, Nanotips had 2,400 backers, and this basically means 7 times the money that they were looking for, they were able to raise. And they had 2,400 people that believed enough. Actually, they had a bunch of friends who always support these things. And then they had some number of people somewhere south of 2,400 that perceived value and thought this was a good enough idea that they wanted to try it out. Okay, sight unseen, because this stuff is not developed at the point that they're raising money. So kind of an interesting one. All right, how many people would be interested in this? All right. Here's one I guarantee none of you are going to be interested in. Anybody think that they have bad posture? Anybody want to do something? No, dancers. Dancers, you can always tell dancers, right? They're like, have a rod in their back, and they're always turned out so they can walk around with this. But bad posture is a bigger problem the older you get, and it's going to be a really big societal problem. Why is it going to be a huge societal problem? Why is it going to be a bigger and bigger issue? Not just as we get older, as you get older. People don't know. Yeah, so we got the computer thing, which we've been doing for a while, and what's the new one? This one, right? So your neck was not designed to stay in this position for extraordinary lengths of time, but we tend to do it. So I'm actually not wearing my Luma back right now, but this Kickstarter project was kind of interesting because it resonated with me in terms of posture, right? And the whole slouching and the computer thing. And what you basically do is you wear this little sensor, which goes on the small of your back, and it tells you and buzzes if you're slouched. Okay, so if I begin to do this, I get a little buzz and I kind of do it. Now, actually what I am wearing is the same company that developed this, and this came out. And it's got a cute little smartphone app so you can actually see an animation that you are slouching or what have you. Detects when you're sitting, detects when you're walking around. So what I do have on is not the sensor, but they came out with another one, and I have a little sensor under my shirt right now. And if I actually press it and hold it, I'm now in a coaching session. So now if I slouch, it's going to buzz. Okay? And it's kind of an interesting thing, and there is a smart app that goes with that too, so I can kind of show you this. Now this is the type of thing that you guys are not going to buy, but it resonated with me. Let's see if this is, okay, so I've had good posture for 5 hours today. Okay. My goal is 4 hours, so I beat my goal, which is pretty good. It tells me I'm remarkable, which is pretty cool. And it's going to constantly update this, all right? So interesting, but nobody here would probably do this. Maybe a little bit later, if they can become even clever, more clever with their sensors, it might resonate with more people. But it's kind of interesting, and it's certainly attracted not 2,400, right, like the nanotips, but it attracted about 1,500 backers, 1,600 backers, and doubled the goal that they were looking for. Now we get to some things that really resonated with tons and tons of people. Anybody here other than me have a Pebble watch? you get it from engineering for free? Yes, okay. You're welcome. We worked on that with a former student of mine and got them to donate a bunch of them. So Pebble Watch, up until very recently, oops, I forgot before Pebble Watch, I'll show you a really cool one. Actually, let me skip ahead and show you Pebble Watch. So we're going to navigate to that while I unpack this one. Okay. So here's Pebble Watch, and up until recently, Pebble Watch was the single most successful Kickstarter campaign, and it's a smartwatch. And everybody says, yeah, well, it's going to be killed as soon as Apple Watch comes out. Surprisingly, it's actually done really well. But check this out. They raised $10 million via Kickstarter. That's no equity. That's real money. 68,000 backers, and of those 68,000, about 65,000 of them actually wanted product. So they paid for product. This is pretty astounding stuff. Because if you get somebody to give you money, hand you money, and there's no product, they really are interested in your product. So they really are resonating with the idea that you've got. So Pebble was pretty cool. Now, if you talk about this is functional. If I talk about the back one, that's also functional. Even Pebble, to a certain extent, you might say, well, there's kind of an emotional connection, because if you're really geeky, you want something like this, or if you went to the boot camp, you get something like this. But I want to show you another Kickstarter project which has nothing to do with functionality. Well, it sort of does. All right, ready? And I'll pass this around. Try not to break it. What is it? It's a light. Okay, so there is a functional aspect of it. Okay? What made everybody go, whoa? It's a book, right? So it's a book light. Kind of different book. What else? So it's a book and it's a light, and you went, whoa? So what made you go, whoa?
It's a symbol.
Symbol of what?
Enlightenment.
Oh, wow, you're going philosophical. Cool. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, it sort of means something more. So it's got to, actually, I'll pass it on this side, because you're practicing the light, so let you take a look at it. So what's interesting about this is there's no way that I would have figured out that that was what was going on here. Because basically all you got a video and you got a picture, and it was sort of interesting, and even the ones that glowed. But nothing had the impact. When I got this thing from the Kickstarter project, and I opened it, and I literally did what you guys did. It was surprising, okay? And I bought it based on the pictures in the video. But it just creates a different visceral reaction. Has nothing to do with functionality. So all of these things are, you're able to judge them. I judge them as good, right, because I was stupid enough to support all these things. But I got different things out of each one of them. And that's what we try to look for in the ideas. And by ideas, it could be just a concept, or it could actually be moving towards a product. These are all products. They actually have physical presence and physical elements of it. So this one also, by the way, was designed by Max. This guy here is an architect in San Francisco. And where do you think he's selling these now? Pier 1? Yes, that. No, not Pier 1. I'll give you a hint that might narrow it down. How much would you guys all in this room say, at that price point, I buy one just because it's got a cool factor? What's the price point that would do it for you? $7? $75. All right, we're beginning to see segmentation here, right? Because he said 75. It's like, yeah, but how many would buy it for 75? Actually, I would buy it for 75. I can't remember how much. I think it was about 75. Might have been $100 in the Kickstarter. How much is he selling it for now? Anybody want to guess? $200. How many of you would buy it at $200? Would you still buy it at $200? You would. Okay. I will tell you right now. I got 6 of them, and I gave them away to certain people for holiday gifts. Best holiday gift I ever got, because these people just said, we would never get anything like this from anybody else, and it's so cool. Conversation piece. At $200, very few people here would buy it, but he's selling them at the Louvre Museum Shop and other high-end museum shops, and then it begins to work, because now it's kind of putting it in a different place. But in terms of the idea, it has a very different impact in terms of what you guys are doing. All right, so Pebble Watch you get. And I mentioned that Pebble was the highest grossing Kickstarter project until recently. Anybody know what beat it?
3D printing.
Sorry?
3D printing?
Nope. Nope.
Was potato salad one?
No, although potato salad I think ended up at 150 grand or something. 110,000. Crazy. All right.
Tracker?
What?
The tracker?
Nope. Here it is. It is called
Oh,
cooler. Okay. Now, what's really interesting about this, from a marketing point of view, is this failed to raise funding in its first Kickstarter program. Yeah, so when you bend it like that, which is cool, it's got magnets, and so you can actually use it the way that you just did. Very clever of you to figure that out. Although I will tell you that normally it's got a little spacer that you put in for the magnets, so now you'll have a hard time getting it apart. But that's okay. It's magnets, you'll get there. So this is the coolest cooler. And the first time they failed to raise it, but after they redid the video, kind of revamped the positioning, so any of you want to take a marketing class or wait for our book to come out next year, there's some really good concepts about how they changed their marketing to reinforce this. Now, here's where I begin to sound like a seen on TV infomercial. So it's a cooler, right? Anything else you notice about this cooler?
Blender.
It's got a blender. And what it actually has is an 18-volt battery built in that powers the blender, right? So you can mix drinks on it, so that's pretty cool. What else does it have? It's got wheels, right? You can't see it, but in the back it's got a collapsible handle, so you can pull the handle up. It's got built-in lunges, so you can actually stack stuff on and roll everything with it. What's going on here? Waterproof Bluetooth speaker. And on the other side, it actually has charging ports for your smartphones. If you open up the lid, it's got places to put dishes and utensils, and probably one of the coolest things, and if you look at the video, they then dim the lights, you open the lid, and it's got LEDs running the inside, so you can actually see which drink you're pulling out of the ice, which is very cool at nighttime. How much do you think it, well, you know it beat $10 million. 62,000 backers, and it raised $13 million. No equity, again. So a lot of people thought this was a good idea. This one has sort of this kitschy combination of functionality and just sort of weird conversation piece. And so all these ideas have different things that are associated with what we think makes them good ideas or bad ideas. But they're ideas nonetheless. And so what I want you to think about is this concept that the same guy that wrote the business model generation book, which many of you have probably seen, some of us use it in classes, also has a new book that just came out today called The Value Proposition Design book. I can't remember what it's actually called. But basically, we look at evaluating ideas in a very simple manner, which is we want to make sure that whatever the idea is, we find people that value the idea. And so it's this whole concept of product market fit, that the idea has some people that really perceive value in it. And what's interesting is that there's a very specific way of breaking it down. And he talks about focusing on the customer and understanding what jobs that customer has to perform. So if we're dealing with the whole posture thing, the jobs I need to perform are remembering to stand up or sit up straight, somehow continuously coaching myself to improve my posture and continuing to do that. That's the job I have to perform. And in the course of doing that job, or thinking about the job, or before or after the job, there are things that are going to be painful for me to deal with, or things that actually give me some benefit. Now, the long-term benefit is if I have better posture, that's the long-term benefit. If I can also reduce any back pain or other sort of nasty stuff, then those are pains that are problematic. So by analyzing who all of our customers are and what the jobs are that they're performing. Now, the job that I'm performing with the Lumo, which is the light thing, it's kind of funny that this is the Lumo back and that's just Lumo, or Lumio. But the job I'm performing with that is not a functional job. It's more of an emotional job, right? Harder to value, but here's the dirty little secret. If you can create something, product idea, that causes people to have an emotional reaction to it, you can charge for it. We'll pay for things that we need. We'll pay more for things that we want. Okay, and you guys all know this. How many of you are Apple fanboys or fan people? How many of you are the Android fan people? Right? So all the people that raise their hand with Apple, you will pay more for stuff because you can get Android cheaper, just as capable. We don't want to get into a philosophical argument here. Suffice it to say, you'll pay more. And that's because Apple does an exceptional job of playing on the emotional jobs that it performs, and to some extent the social jobs, meaning the status that it represents when you're carrying things around in public. Okay? So it's all about the customers that you're dealing with, the jobs they're performing, the gains they can realize from performing those jobs, or the pains that they're enduring during the course of those jobs. So your ideas need to be turned into products and services that basically say, aha, if I know who I'm trying to go after, and I know the jobs that they're trying to perform, all I need to do is communicate to people and actually be able to deliver something that executes on enhancing the gains that they experience before, during, or after the jobs that they're doing, or alleviate pains. Another little hint, sometimes it's easier to sell pain relievers than it is to sell gain enhancers, okay? Because pain relievers, if I sit here and I drone on and you begin to get a headache, if I said, I can give you something that would prevent the headache before you got in here, it'd be tougher sell than if you start getting a headache and I say, by the way, anybody want to buy an Advil? Right? I'd probably have an easier response, an easier time selling. So what's interesting is evaluating ideas in this context suddenly goes a long way towards understanding your positioning from a marketing point of view. Positioning being, who is going to perceive value in this? How are they going to perceive value? And how can I basically differentiate what I'm trying to deliver to them from something else that might be performing the same function or providing the same emotional value? Okay? So that's just the concept there. Now we want to get to the part where you guys actually are involved in this, and that's how do we come up with an idea? And this is the really tough part about it. Too often, and we do a lot of work with companies who are trying to come up with new products, new services, new markets, doing things in new ways. And they create these programs and invest a lot of time to come up with this, all in the hopes that somebody's going to sit in a room and a light bulb's going to go off and life will magically get better. And it's just not the way it works. So the way that you actually come up with ideas is much more about process and about a culture of idea generation. It is not about, let's put a bunch of people in a room, feed them with Thai food and sort of educational information, and then poof, you're going to come up with the next blockbuster idea. Doesn't work that way. Lots of different approaches. One I thought I'd just share with you really quickly is this idea of design thinking. Anybody had classes where they talked about design thinking? Okay. There are classes here, so if you're interested in this, they're in the design school, they're in engineering. Dave Robertson, who wrote the Lego book, does a lot of work with design thinking in Open. So this is just one way to look at design thinking as a process, and the process starts in a sort of phase that we call inspire. And this is where you're really trying to find a theme to riff on, right? Any musicians here, you're basically just looking to find a theme that you can then begin to cultivate, okay? Now, that theme can come from a lot of different things, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments, but we take that theme and we say, okay, now we're going to kind of frame that and brainstorm, right? Come up with a lot of different ways that we might address whatever this theme was that we developed in the inspiration or inspire phase. This is going to be that ideation phase where we sort of frame things up, come up with a bunch of ideas, and hopefully at some point kind of cull them down so that we can bring the implementation or execution side of what's going on. And this is really where we say, well, we came up with this idea, but let's put it in a context, a marketplace, and begin to find how people actually react or respond to it. One of the greatest things about Kickstarter is it incredibly is a cost-effective way to do all sorts of implementation experimentation. You can test, does anybody care? Will people actually put up money? What are the types of things that they'll gravitate to? I mean, you can have all different levels of sponsorship, and which ones they choose and gravitate to can give you a lot of great information about it. So we didn't have ways of doing that before. We'd go out and we'd survey people and say, would you buy this? And they'd say, yeah. And then if we actually came out with it, they wouldn't buy it because they wanted to make sure they weren't hurting our feelings. So this can be a really, really effective way to just kind of frame what it means to come up with an idea, that it's not a blinding flash of the obvious while you're sitting in a room with a bunch of people, but it's actually a process. And like any process, you can work through it, practice it, and get better at it, which is important. Now, the inspire part is the tough part. And one thing that let me just jump back for a second. One thing that I think is kind of an interesting idea or an interesting approach is when you come back to this, there's sort of two camps right now. And in my world and in the work that I've done, I've actually been able to say, okay, I can tell you which camp we're dealing with. Some people say, you come up with the idea. You come up with this first. And then you navigate that into the marketplace to identify the best customer segment to approach. Other people say, no, you start over here. You do the analysis of their jobs, and you figure out what they need to accomplish, what their needs and what their wants are. And that's the context within which you come up with a product. I've tried to make, I'm a sort of neat and simple, and I don't like to get too complex. So for me, it's pretty straightforward. If you're a technologist, right, an engineer, or somebody that is just coming up with ideas, you start here and you look for your market. If you're a Wharton person, you're probably going to start with the customer, do some examination, investigation, and then you're going to figure out a product. Okay? So I don't care which way you start. The important thing is that you need to learn how to migrate these two together so that you achieve product market fit, which is finding a way for these to come together. Okay? So that's sort of a way to think about this process. And we're going to do a variation on this particular process, which means we've got to figure out a way in about 45 minutes for you to get to this inspire part. So I'm going to give you a very specific way to do that. And it starts with what I call the anti-innovation work. This is the phrase that is so overused when it comes to innovation and idea generation. It's this think outside of the box, which to me is translated to somebody walking up to you and saying, forget everything you know, everything you've learned, everything you do on a regular basis, and come up with something different. I don't know how you do that. Okay? So I like to flip it around and say, stay in your box. Okay? For those of you who can't see, never think outside of the box. But your box is your everyday experience. It's what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether you're in the labs, working on new technologies, or whether you're walking around campus on your way to and from school. I like boxes. Boxes are what you live and experience every day. So you understand the jobs associated with what's in your box. You understand the people or the customers that are in your box. You understand, hopefully, the experiences that those people have. So my way, and what we're going to do today, is get into your boxes, but hopefully just think about them a little bit differently. Okay? Now, if you want to say, where do I go look for an idea? Then just think about the box that you deal with on an everyday basis. So you can go look at existing businesses that you might have some connection to, friends or family or businesses you work for right now. You might just go to people. Forget the businesses, forget the context, just go talk to people. You might just think about what you do and what you're interested in doing. One of the first things that was mentioned in terms of what's important in team is passion. I can't think of anything better than spending your life and your time working on something that you're personally interested in, right? Because it stinks to work on something you're not really interested in. Anybody had a job that they just didn't like? Didn't like the company, didn't like the products, didn't like what they were doing. Don't do that. Focus on things you like. You're going to have a much more engaged time with it. So it could be things you're already doing. It could be hobbies that you have. One of our favorite ones to talk about at the engineering entrepreneurship program is we had a materials science student who came up with a new material for surfboards. Where do you think that idea came from? He was a surfer. Okay? Great idea. And he knew what worked and what didn't work on boards, and he had some of the technical background to be able to say, from a materials point of view, can we develop something that can be a better board, right? Which he did. You can also look at some external things. So if you're more the business person, you say, I want to start something, I want to come up with an idea, but I'm just not that type of person. Go do a search and find other people's ideas that you might be able to develop or commercialize or bring into a marketplace environment. Okay? And so there are lots of resources. We've got technology transfer here. You're in a hotbed of technology and ideas here, so you can do that. All right. So what we're going to get to is the process, right, that we're going to go through, which is how do we start with a thematic concept, come up with lots of different possible ideas, and then begin to winnow them down. And we want to do that using two really important resources, one of which is your individual creativity, and the other of which is your collective or group creativity. Okay? So this is what we mean by divergent thinking. We start with our topic, we go with the familiar stuff, the stuff that comes to mind quickly and first, and then we begin to broaden it out. We broaden it out by getting together with people that we don't know. We broaden it out by just thinking about things without restricting ourselves. And so that's going to give us the ability to diverge our thinking. Now, this unfortunately is where a lot of our clients want to stop. They just want to say, let's come up with as many different ideas, and one is going to emerge as the light bulb, and we're going to follow that, and it's going to be the new blockbuster idea. There's as much process in the convergence and the investigation and experimentation of ideas. And so we've got to do that part too. So we're going to diverge, and we're going to use a couple of tools. We're going to talk a little bit about brainstorming, we're going to talk about multi-voting, and we're going to break up into groups. And I've got a really easy way to break up into groups, because all of these rows are pre-configured, with the exception of you guys in the middle, but that's okay. So you five are going to be a group, and then every other row, and then we're just going to kind of divvy this up a little bit, okay? And I know I just put you in a really uncomfortable position of having to deal with people that you don't know, but that's diversity. We're sort of creating the diversity of the groups, okay? So now we have to come up with that topic, because remember the topic is the theme that you've got to diverge from. So I'm going to give you your topic, and the topic starts with that posture issue that I talked about. I love this statistic because this is the great tragedy of smartphones, okay? And I know you guys are laughing because how many of you, it's not 15 minutes, it's like wake up and pull it out of the cradle and look, right? This is sort of, it's me, I'm there, all right? And so this is where we live right now. If you can't read it in the back, it says, it's official. Instead of sex, men now think about the iPhone every 7 seconds. And she says it's not just men. This is one, I was in Japan a while ago, and I love this picture because a formal bridal gown in full regalia, right, in the middle of this beautiful park, absolutely serene texting, right, the whole posture thing, everything going down. We've all seen this, right? This is how we externalize our smartphones. Everything is held facing out. But more often than not, we're looking at this type of picture, okay? Now, what I want you guys to do, and what we're going to do here, is turn off your smartphones, because you don't need them for this exercise. And what we're going to do is think about what you've done just over the last couple of days, okay? So this is where we get into kind of this observation thing. Now here's the process that we're going to do. Before we get into your groups, I want you to individually take 5 minutes, okay? So the first part of this is I want you to think about 10 things, right? So this requires you to kind of go back and think about what you did today, how you walked around, what you might be doing. And I want you to think about 10 things that just made you go, wow, that's really cool, or that really pissed you off, or just made you stop and think as opposed to sending the next text message, okay? So I want you to come up with a list of 10 things right now. You've got 5 minutes, take a piece of paper or a computer, write these 10 things down, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and then we're going to get you into groups.